back to my channel, Sarah's Grand Adventures. I'm so excited that you're here watching my second YouTube video, and I'm thrilled to be talking today about my first ever international travel experience. My mother-in-law recently said something to me that really impacted me. She said, "You cannot travel internationally and come back the same person." And I just thought that really kind of describes my first travel experience and all the emotions and the feelings that I got from that first travel experience. Growing up, we didn't travel. I didn't have a passport. My mother didn't have a passport. We just didn't have the money to travel. So it wasn't something that I particularly ever knew about, knew how to like. I knew, like, by the time I became a teenager, that I had friends that were going away and doing these international travels in the summer, but I didn't really know what that meant. When I was 18, I did go to a field hockey tournament down in California, and that was the first time I'd ever had a passport and I'd ever really left the country in any significant way. But it was really just for the field hockey trip. So I didn't necessarily know that, or I didn't experience it in a way that it was like, wow, I'm in another country. I was just at a field hockey tournament. So in 2014, I consider my trip to Scotland to be my first international travel experience, because that was really when I was like, whoa, I'm going to another country. There's other countries out there that you can visit. And I had really hyped up this trip in my mind like it was going to be this, crazy life-changing thing, which is actually something that I've continued to do every time I've gone on a big trip. I have gone into it and been like, I am going to have my life change from this trip. Everything's going to change. It's going to be a big deal. This is going to happen. And generally, when you want something to happen and you expect it to happen and you truly believe that it is going to happen, then it does. So my first trip to Stirling, Scotland was no exception. It was life-changing. So there's really nothing like the feeling of when you arrive somewhere new for the first time. Once you're an experienced traveler, arriving something new, it still puts you in awe, and it's still, this really breathtaking experience. But there is something so different about doing it for the first time, because you don't know what to expect. And so when it happens, it's like you can't prepare yourself. No matter how many times people try to describe it to you, it's something you really have to experience. So if you're about to travel internationally for the first time, have this, big adventure, then you're really about to have your breath taken away. I flew with my pipe band. I play the drums in a pipe band, and that's why we were going to Scotland. We were going for a parade, and we were playing at the Stirling Castle, which was an incredible experience that we'll get into in a little bit. So while this was considered a solo travel experience, it kind of wasn't. I wasn't going with like friends or family. I was going with my band for a purpose. So that was a really nice way, as somebody who considers himself an anxious traveler, it was really nice to have that experience for the first time, not entirely alone, with people that I did know. And it was the longest flight I had ever taken. I had taken a few flights. I had flown down to California when I was 18, and I had flown around my province, but nothing this big. So it was a big flight. We went directly from Vancouver to Glasgow, which was, a long stint. It was at least 8.5 hours to 10 hours. I can't exactly remember, but it was a very long flight for my first go. But it was kind of nice to have it all in one go and not have to worry about, switching, layovers in different airports, which actually, funnily enough, I now prefer to have different layovers because I'm not so good at sitting still. But for the first one, with my band, with people to talk to, the direct flight was fine. But then it's like, I had flown over British Columbia a number of times, and I consider British Columbia to be a very beautiful place. But as I was flying into Glasgow, it was like, no words can describe just how green it is. Like, I looked out the window and I was like, I have never in my life seen this much green on the ground. And as we were getting closer and closer, my nerves, but also my excitement started to build up at the same time. But then, just like any great travel experience, in a new place, there's new culture, things look different. And that was really what kind of picked up this whole incredible feeling of, wow, I'm in a new country. I have never traveled internationally before. This is amazing. We were on the bus and we're driving past, and if you've ever been to the UK, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say just the buildings. I used like one of those early 2000s digital cameras on this trip, and I swear half of my photos are just buildings, because the buildings were just so cool. Most of them are made of stone or brick. The architecture is just like so amazing. And that's one of the things that I love most when I travel, is to see the architecture in other countries. But something that really I was expecting a really life-changing kind of trip. But what I wasn't expecting was this expansion and freedom of exploring somewhere new, just like the inner feelings, and like the empowerment and the confidence that I got from this trip. Stirling is not a very large place, but it will always be a place that is near and dear to my heart, one of my favorite places in Scotland. And I think a lot of that comes from, that feeling of freedom that you get when you travel somewhere for the first time. It will always be, the first big international travel that I experienced. It's also the place where I got engaged, because of the significance to me. And so it was, I felt safe and comfortable walking around the city by myself because it wasn't huge. It was also fairly early in the tourist season. It was in June, not in like the heart of summer. So there was like a decent amount of tourists, but it wasn't like overly crazy like we would have had in Glasgow or in Edinburgh. And so there's no way to describe that feeling of freedom and awe that you get when you're walking around a new place for the first time, when you have already hyped yourself up saying that this is going to be a life-changing experience. It's almost like you become a brand new person through these experiences. Every time I go on a significant trip, I've been to Scotland 3 times now, I've been to Greece, we've been to Mexico. Every time I go on a big trip like that, a new person comes home. And these trips always seem to happen exactly when I need them to happen. And so when I went to Scotland for the first time in 2014, that was exactly what it was. I had been struggling with money. I was in university. I had a lot of mental health issues. I'm struggling with an eating disorder. It was a hard time. The job that I was at, there was something wrong with my pay and the system, and I wasn't getting paid. I hadn't been paid for months. And so trying to save for this trip was really difficult. So, luckily my mom was willing to help me fundraise, and, I had really amazing supportive friends, that were more than happy to help me out. And I really would not have been able to do it without my friends and my family pitching in, because I wasn't making any money. It wasn't until I got back from the trip that I ended up, having my pay sorted out. So that was fine. But, it was a really difficult time, and I went and I just prayed. I really wanted to go somewhere and come back somebody new. And that's exactly what happened. When I came back, slowly but surely, I started to really find myself again. Once I realized the kind of freedom that I could get by experiences like traveling to another country, that was when I really started to heal from everything that had happened in my life. My mental health got so much better. I was able to overcome my eating disorder. The pay was sorted out. University was great. I had a really amazing, supportive spouse who is now my husband. I really started to become the person that I was meant to be. The first person, I feel like every time I go somewhere, I come back a different person. And each person was necessary for me to become the next person. And I don't really think there's an ending to that. I just think that at each point in your life, you're supposed to become, not necessarily a whole different person, but, your mindset changes, your values change, all this kind of stuff. So that travel experience, I think, was the start of a really wonderful path to healing and mindset change. I was able to eventually, the next year, graduate from university. I had a wonderful career, and then I started my business, which is what I'm doing now. I don't think I would have had the courage or the bravery to be able to do all that had I not had this first travel experience. So if you have travel on your mind, if you're new to it, you haven't done it before, I highly recommend just planning the trip of your dreams. Honestly, I had been a pipe band musician for a long time at that point, so Scotland was absolutely on my mind, and it is now my absolute favorite country. Like I said, I've been 3 times and potentially a 4th time this coming year. And so just find a place that is on your bucket list that you love. Start planning, even if you don't have the money, even if you don't have the time or the funds. Sometimes just planning it is really fun. And you don't have to have a date necessarily, but start planning that trip of your dreams. Even if it's 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road, just plan it. Look on apps, look up flights, look up accommodation, what you're gonna do. Just start planning it, because even that can start to shift something in you, which is a really beautiful thing. I have more on my first travel experience to Stirling, Scotland on my adventure and travel blog at www.sarahsgrandadventures.com. I highly recommend going and checking it out. You can make fun of all the early 2000s digital camera photos that I have on there. Don't worry, photos have gotten better as I have upgraded my phone. But I highly recommend checking out that blog because I have specifics of things that I did there, things that I loved, some tips. Go check it out. And once again, thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, go and hit the subscribe button, because I just appreciate, as a new YouTuber, a new blogger, having you come out and support me. And my goal is to be doing YouTube videos once a week. They're not going to be very long. This is going to be maybe 15 minutes. So I try to keep things short and concise. I really love getting to share my stories, and I would love to hear from you. So if you've been to Scotland, to Stirling, or you've had, your first amazing travel experience where you've experienced some of the same things that I have, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear about them. So stay tuned for next week's video. Thank you so much for being here.